The coffin was carved from black stone and sealed with symbols Nora Gallagher didn't recognize, and the moment her flashlight beam hit it, every instinct screamed at her to run. But Nora had never been good at listening to her instincts. That's how she'd ended up divorced at 26, working 3 cleaning jobs to keep her studio apartment, and currently standing in the basement of the Ashford estate at 11 o'clock on a Friday night because Mrs. Chen had begged her to cover this shift. The previous cleaner had quit without explanation, and the agency was desperate. The estate had been empty for decades, or so she'd been told. Some distant relative had finally hired a property management company to prepare it for sale, which meant someone had to clean out a century's worth of dust and decay. Nora needed the money badly enough that she hadn't asked questions. She should have asked questions. The basement stretched far beyond what the house's footprint should have allowed, a vast stone chamber that felt more like a cathedral crypt than a storage space. Her footsteps echoed too loudly. The air tasted old and still, untouched by ventilation or time. And in the center of it all, raised on a dais of 3 stone steps, sat the coffin. Nora approached slowly, her cleaning supplies forgotten by the stairs. The symbols carved into the stone seemed to shimmer in her flashlight beam, though that had to be a trick of the dust motes swirling through the air. They looked almost like words, but in no alphabet she'd ever seen. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each line precise and deliberate, suggesting this was no ordinary burial. She reached out before she could stop herself, fingers trembling as they hovered over the cold stone surface. "Don't touch it," her mind whispered. "Nothing good comes from opening sealed coffins in creepy basements." But her hand was already moving, pressing against one of the symbols. It gave beneath her touch with a soft click that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The seal broke with a sound like shattering glass, though nothing visible cracked. The lid shifted, just slightly, releasing a breath of air so cold it burned her lungs. Nora stumbled backward, heart hammering, as the coffin lid slowly, impossibly, began to slide open on its own. She should run. She should absolutely run right now. Instead, she stood frozen as the lid fell away completely, clattering against the stone floor with a crash that made her flinch. Darkness spilled from the coffin's interior like smoke, and then eyes opened. Crimson eyes that gleamed in the darkness like fresh blood, locked onto her with an intensity that made her knees weak. And he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just found prey, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Then he sat up, moving with a fluid grace that defied the fact that he'd apparently been lying in that coffin for who knew how long, and Nora forgot how to breathe. He was the most beautiful and horrifying thing she'd ever seen. His skin was pale as fresh snow, luminous in the dim light, stretched over features so perfectly sculpted they seemed carved from marble. Hair the color of fresh snow fell past his shoulders, contrasting sharply with the deep black of his clothing, some kind of elaborate coat that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it was his eyes that held her captive, burning red and ancient and far too aware. "Finally," he said, and his voice rolled through the basement like thunder, deep and commanding and touched with an accent she couldn't place. "I was beginning to think the bloodline had died out entirely." Nora found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What are you?" His smile widened, revealing fangs that gleamed white and sharp. "I am Vladric Konstantin Drăculești, the third of that name, High King of the Vampire Courts and Lord of the Eternal Night." He rose from the coffin in a single smooth motion, stepping down from the dais with the bearing of royalty. "And you, little human, have just broken a 200-year-old seal meant to imprison me until the stars burned out." Oh God! Nora's legs finally remembered how to work. She turned to run. She made it 3 steps before he was in front of her, moving faster than her eyes could track. One moment he'd been across the room. The next, he stood between her and the stairs, head tilted slightly as he studied her with those burning eyes. "Don't run," he said softly, and it wasn't quite a command, but it froze her in place anyway. "I've been locked in darkness for 2 centuries. The least you can do is tell me your name before you flee in terror." "Nora," she gasped out. "Nora Gallagher. I'm just a cleaning lady. I didn't know anyone was down here. I didn't mean to break any seal or free any vampire kings or—" "Nora." He said her name like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth. "An honest name for an honest trade? Tell me, Nora Gallagher, What year is it? 2026. Something flickered across his perfect features. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. 217 years. They left me here for 217 years. His hands clenched into fists, and the temperature in the basement dropped another 10 degrees. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and deadly. I'm going to kill every single one of them. Who? Nora asked, though she wasn't sure why she was engaging in conversation with a vampire king who'd just threatened murder. Maybe shock had broken something in her brain. The Council of Elders, the bastards who betrayed me and locked me in that stone prison. Vladric turned his gaze back to her, and some of the rage faded from his expression. But first, I need to understand this new world I've woken into. You will help me. It wasn't a question. Nora shook her head anyway. I really can't. I have 2 more houses to clean tonight, and I need this job, and I'm pretty sure aiding and abetting a vampire king is against some kind of law. I could compel you. He moved closer, and she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. Force your cooperation with nothing more than a thought. Would you prefer that? No, Nora said quickly, but I don't want to help you kill people either. Then don't think of it as helping me kill people. That dangerous smile returned. Think of it as preventing me from killing you. Motivation is such an important thing, don't you agree? Her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. You're going to kill me anyway, aren't you? Once I'm not useful anymore? Vladric studied her for a long moment, those crimson eyes seeming to peer straight through to her soul. No, he said finally, and he sounded almost surprised. No, I don't think I will. Do you know what you did, little Nora? When you broke that seal, she shook her head mutely. You created a blood bond. The magic of the seal recognized you as its breaker and tied your life to mine. I can feel your heartbeat, hear your breathing, sense your fear. He reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away, and pressed one cold finger to the pulse point in her throat. Right now, you are the most precious thing in this world to me. Because if you die, the seal reactivates and I go back into that stone coffin for another 200 years. So no, Nora Gallagher, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to protect you with every ounce of power I possess, whether you like it or not. Nora's mind was reeling. A blood bond. That sounds very permanent and magical and like something I definitely didn't sign up for. And yet, here we are. He withdrew his hand but didn't step back. I need clothes that fit this century, information about how the world has changed, and a place to stay while I gather my strength and locate what remains of my court. You're going to provide those things. I live in a 400-square-foot studio apartment, Nora protested. I can barely fit my own stuff in there, let alone a vampire king. Then I suppose we'll be very close. The amusement in his voice made her want to hit him. Survival instincts be damned. Come. Standing in this tomb grows tiresome, and I can smell fresh air from above. Show me this new world, Nora Gallagher. She should refuse. Should scream, run, call the police, do literally anything except lead an ancient vampire into the modern world. But that cold finger pressed to her throat had confirmed what her instincts already knew: he was faster, stronger, and more dangerous than anything she'd ever encountered. And if what he said about the blood bond was true, her life was now inextricably tangled with his. Fine, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. But if you kill anyone, I'm going to be very upset. Vladric laughed, a sound like rolling thunder. Duly noted. Your upset has been registered and will be taken under advisement. He gestured toward the stairs with a sweep of his hand that was pure aristocratic grace. After you. Nora gathered her cleaning supplies with shaking hands and led the vampire king up from the basement. The house above was dark and silent, sheets covering furniture that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating Vladric's features as he paused in the entrance hall, looking around with an expression of deep satisfaction. The Ashford estate, he murmured. I gifted this property to one of my loyal servants in 1802. Theodore Ashford, a good man for a human. He swore his bloodline would protect it until my return. His expression darkened. I suppose they failed in that promise. The property management company said the last Ashford died 3 years ago, Nora offered. No heirs, that's why they're selling it. The bloodline died out. Vladric's jaw tightened. How convenient for the council. Tell me, are there still vampire courts in this world? Do my kind still rule from the shadows? I don't know, Nora admitted. Until about 10 minutes ago, I thought vampires were just stories. He turned to look at her, those red eyes glinting with something that might have been amusement. Oh, we're very real, little Nora. We always have been. The only question is whether the council still maintains control, or if some new power has risen in my absence. He moved toward the door with that preternatural speed, then paused. This will be locked, yes? How do people secure their homes in this century? Nora pulled out her keyring, showing him the electronic key fob the property management company had given her. It's digital now, mostly. Vladric examined the device with the fascination of someone who'd last seen the world before electricity. Remarkable. The humans have become quite clever with their little machines. He glanced at her. You'll need to teach me everything. How to navigate this new world, how to pass as human, what has changed and what remains the same. That wasn't part of our deal, Nora pointed out. Our deal, Vladric said softly, moving close enough that she could feel that impossible cold again, is that you remain alive and I remain free. Everything else is negotiable. He reached past her to unlock the door, his arm brushing against her shoulder. Now come. I wish to see the night sky without stone walls blocking my view. They stepped out into the cool spring air, and Vladric froze. For a long moment he simply stood there, head tilted back, breathing in deeply. His expression was one of such pure relief that Nora felt something in her chest tighten unexpectedly. Whatever else he was, whatever danger he represented, he'd been trapped in darkness for more than 200 years. She couldn't imagine that kind of imprisonment. The stars have moved, he said quietly. Not much, but enough. 2 centuries, marked in the shifting of constellations. He lowered his gaze to the street beyond the estate's gates, where streetlights cast orange pools of illumination. And what are those? Some kind of gas lamps? Electric lights. We have electricity now, and cars and computers and smartphones, and Nora cut herself off. This is going to take a while to explain. Then we'd better get started. Vladric's smile was sharp and eager. Show me everything, Nora Gallagher. I have 2 centuries of human progress to catch up on, and eternity stretches before us. Nora's small car had never felt smaller than with Vladric, folding his tall frame into the passenger seat. He examined everything with intense curiosity, the seatbelt, the dashboard controls, the radio that crackled to life when she turned the key. When the car actually started moving, he gripped the door handle hard enough that the plastic creaked. This is your horseless carriage? He asked, watching the world blur past outside his window. We call them cars now, and this is a really slow one. Nora navigated through the quiet streets, heading toward her apartment complex on the other side of town. Some of them can go over 200 miles per hour. Extraordinary. Vladric pressed his hand against the window glass, cold breath fogging it slightly. What else has changed? Where did she even start? Nora spent the 20-minute drive trying to summarize 2 centuries of human advancement: electricity, television, the internet, space travel, modern medicine, nuclear weapons, climate change, social media. Vladric absorbed it all with the focus of a predator, asking sharp questions that revealed a keen intelligence behind those inhuman eyes. And vampires? He asked as they pulled into her apartment complex's parking lot. Do humans know we exist? No, at least not that I've ever heard. There are stories, movies, books about vampires, but everyone thinks they're fiction. Nora cut the engine and turned to face him. If there are real vampires out there, they've kept themselves hidden. As they should. Vladric's expression was grim. The council always valued secrecy above all else. They believed that revealing ourselves to humanity would lead to war and extinction. I disagreed. He met her eyes. That's why they sealed me away. I wanted to end the hiding, to reclaim our rightful place as the apex of the food chain. The council called me a warmonger and a tyrant. Were they wrong? Nora asked quietly. Vladric's smile was sharp as broken glass. About the tyrant part? Probably not. I ruled the vampire courts with absolute authority for 300 years before they betrayed me. But a warmonger? No. I simply believed that hiding in shadows and pretending to be myths was beneath our dignity as a species. He opened the car door with some fumbling, then stepped out into the parking lot. Though I must admit, seeing how far humanity has advanced, perhaps the Council was wiser than I gave them credit for. Nuclear weapons, you said? Bombs that can level entire cities? Countries have thousands of them, Nora confirmed, climbing out and locking the car. Mutual assured destruction is the only thing keeping everyone from using them. How delightfully terrifying. Vladric followed her across the parking lot, his antique coat drawing stares from a couple of late-night dog walkers. Your species has achieved the power to destroy itself. I'm almost impressed. Nora's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator was broken again, so she led Vladric up the stairs, acutely aware of how shabby everything must look to someone who'd owned entire estates. But he didn't comment, just followed her with that predatory grace until she unlocked her door and ushered him inside. The studio was exactly as she'd left it, small, cramped, and decorated with mismatched furniture from thrift stores. Her bed was shoved into one corner, her tiny kitchen occupied another, and her entire living space could probably fit inside Vladric's coffin with room to spare. He stood in the center of the room, looking around with an unreadable expression. "Cozy," he said finally. "It's cheap, and the landlord doesn't ask questions," Nora replied defensively. "And before you say anything, the couch folds out into a bed. You can sleep there." "Sleep?" Vladric's laugh was genuinely amused. "Little Nora, I've been sleeping for 217 years. I don't think I'll be doing much more of that anytime soon." He moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to look out at the city lights. "But I appreciate the gesture. Tell me, do you have any books about modern history? I need to understand what I've missed." Nora pulled out her laptop. "Better than books. I have the entire internet." The next few hours passed in a strange blur. Nora sat on her bed with her laptop, pulling up Wikipedia articles and news sites, while Vladric absorbed information with frightening speed. He learned about both world wars, the rise and fall of empires, technological revolutions, social movements, and everything else that had transformed the world since 1809. His questions were sharp and insightful, and despite her fear, Nora found herself drawn into genuine conversation. "The mortals overthrew so many monarchies," he mused, reading about the French and Russian revolutions, "and yet they still crave strong leaders. Democracy is a pretty lie, but humanity still organizes itself into hierarchies of power." He glanced at her. "Some things never change." "People can vote now," Nora pointed out. "Women, minorities, everyone. That's different from your time." "Is it?" Vladric's expression was thoughtful. "The powerful still control the weak, just with different methods. Money instead of noble titles. Corporate oligarchs instead of kings." He closed the laptop gently. "But perhaps I'm being too cynical. At least you have the illusion of choice now. That's something." "You're very dismissive of humanity for someone who needs my help," Nora said before she could stop herself. Vladric's eyes gleamed. "I don't dismiss humanity at all. I find your species endlessly fascinating, so brief and yet so brilliant, burning through your short lives with passionate intensity. You create art and wage war and love with everything you have because you know it's all temporary." He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. "You're not weak, Nora Gallagher. You're fragile, which is different. Beautiful and breakable, like a flower that blooms for a single day." Nora's breath caught. This close, she could see the inhuman perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. "You're trying to charm me. Is it working?" "No," she lied. His smile said he knew it was a lie. "Good. You should be wary of me. I am dangerous, ancient, and utterly ruthless when pursuing my goals. But I meant what I said about the blood bond, Nora. Your life is precious to me now, more precious than you can possibly understand." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cold but gentle. "I will keep you safe. That much I can promise." "Why do I feel like that's both reassuring and terrifying?" Nora whispered. "Nora, Because you're smarter than you think you are. Vladric stood, putting distance between them. You should rest. The sun will rise in a few hours, and while I can tolerate sunlight better than most of my kind, I'd prefer not to test my limits on my first day of freedom. Nora blinked. Wait, you can go out in sunlight? Royal blood has its advantages, Vladric explained. The curse affects us differently. Direct sunlight weakens me considerably and burns if I'm exposed too long, but I won't burst into flames or turn to ash. The common vampires aren't so fortunate. He moved to the window again, watching the sky. The council used to joke that royal vampires were the daylight spawn, powerful enough to walk in both worlds but belonging fully to neither. That sounds lonely, Nora said quietly. Vladric glanced back at her, something unreadable in his expression. It is, but power always comes with isolation. The higher you climb, the fewer equals you have to stand beside you. He turned away from the window. Sleep, Nora. Tomorrow we begin in earnest. Nora changed into her pajamas in the tiny bathroom, acutely aware that a vampire king was standing in her living room. When she emerged, she found Vladric examining her bookshelf with interest, reading the spines of her battered paperback collection. Romance novels, he observed. Do you believe in these kinds of happy endings? I like to, Nora admitted, climbing into bed. Reality is harsh enough. What's wrong with enjoying stories where people find love and everything works out? Nothing at all. Vladric pulled out a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, flipping through the pages. We had novels in my time, too, though they were rarer and more expensive. I was rather fond of Gothic romances myself, all those dark heroes and swooning heroines. His smile was self-deprecating. I suppose I'm a cliché now, aren't I? The vampire in the night, straight out of one of your storybooks. You're scarier than any book vampire, Nora said, pulling her blanket up, and more real. Reality is always more terrifying than fiction. Vladric settled into the armchair by the window, the book still in his hands. Sleep, little Nora. I'll keep watch. You don't have to. Yes, I do. The blood bond works both ways. I can feel that you're exhausted, running on fear and adrenaline. Rest. I promise nothing will harm you while I draw breath. There was something so absolutely certain in his voice that Nora felt her eyelids growing heavy despite everything. She was asleep within minutes, her last conscious thought wondering what she'd gotten herself into. She woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she thought the previous night had been some bizarre stress dream brought on by too many late shifts. Then she sat up and saw Vladric standing in her kitchen, somehow having figured out how to use her coffee maker. He'd removed his elaborate coat, revealing a white shirt that looked straight out of the Regency era. In the daylight, his skin seemed to glow even more, and his white hair caught the sun like fresh snow. He looked utterly out of place in her modern kitchen, a creature of Gothic romance transplanted into the 21st century. You're still here, Nora said stupidly. Did you hope I'd disappeared in the night? Vladric poured coffee into 2 mugs with surprising competence. I told you, the blood bond ties us together. I'm not going anywhere without you. Nora accepted the coffee gratefully, noting that he'd somehow made it exactly how she liked it. How did you know how I take my coffee? I watched you make it last night before you showed me the internet. He leaned against the counter, watching her with those unsettling red eyes. I pay attention to details, Nora. It's kept me alive for over 700 years. 700 years. The number made her dizzy. How old were you when you returned? 28. Young for a king, but my father died unexpectedly, and I inherited both his throne and his curse. Vladric sipped his own coffee black. I ruled the vampire courts for 3 centuries before the council decided I was too dangerous to remain in power. They drugged me with vampire's bane, sealed me in that stone coffin, and hid me away in the Ashford estate's basement. His expression darkened. They thought they were protecting vampire society. They were really just afraid I'd take away their power. What are you going to do now? Nora asked carefully. Find out what's left of my court, locate the council members who betrayed me, reclaim my throne. He said it so casually, like he was listing groceries instead of plotting a coup. But first, I need to understand this new world and regain my full strength. 2 centuries in that coffin weakened me considerably. I need to feed. Nora's hand tightened on her coffee mug. Feed on what? Blood, naturally. What else would a vampire drink? Vladric's expression softened slightly at whatever he saw on her face. I won't take yours without permission, if that's what you're afraid of. The blood bond makes you far too valuable to risk weakening. But I will need to hunt soon. You can't just go around killing people, Nora protested. I don't need to kill to feed. A pint or two is enough, and the donor rarely remembers afterward if I compel them properly. Vladric set down his mug. Though I admit, I was planning to make exceptions for certain council members. Vladric, don't worry, little Nora, I won't murder anyone today. His smile was sharp. I'm far too weak for proper revenge. Today we focus on the basics, getting me clothing that won't make me look like I walked out of a Jane Austen novel, and finding out what happened to the vampire world in my absence. They spent the day transforming a vampire king into someone who could pass on modern streets. Nora took him to a department store where Vladric tried on jeans and t-shirts with the air of someone handling alien artifacts. He settled on dark clothing that suited his dramatic coloring: black jeans, black shirts, a long black coat that he insisted on because some things are non-negotiable. The sales clerk kept staring at his hair and eyes, but Vladric explained he was an albino model, which seemed to satisfy her curiosity. Nora was impressed by how quickly he adapted, picking up modern speech patterns and mannerisms with frightening speed. You're good at blending in, she observed as they left the store with several bags. I've had centuries of practice. Vladric wore sunglasses now, shielding his red eyes from both sunlight and curious stares. Vampires have always lived among humans. We just learned to be very, very careful about it. He paused on the sidewalk, looking around at the busy street with its cars and smartphones and the 1,000 small miracles of modern life. Though I must admit, this world is stranger than anything I could have imagined. You've done remarkable things, you mortals. We've also done terrible things, Nora said quietly. The wars, the genocides, the environmental damage. Every species does terrible things given enough time and power. Vladric's hand found her elbow, steadying her as someone jostled past. Don't romanticize the past, Nora. My time had its own horrors: slavery, plague, endless wars. At least your century pretends to care about human rights. They returned to her apartment as the sun began setting. Vladric seemed to relax as darkness fell, the tension leaving his shoulders. Better, he murmured. Night is when I'm strongest. Are you going to hunt tonight? Nora asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Yes, but you're coming with me. He held up a hand before she could protest. The blood bond means I need to keep you close until I'm stronger. If we're separated and you're hurt or killed, I go back in that coffin. So wherever I go, you go, at least for now. Nora wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Fine, but no killing. No killing, Vladric agreed. Tonight, I make no promises about the future. They went to a nightclub downtown, the kind of place Nora had never been able to afford. Vladric moved through the crowd like he owned it, drawing eyes everywhere he went. His otherworldly beauty and confident bearing made people gravitate toward him, and within minutes he'd charmed his way into the VIP section with Nora in tow. She watched in fascination as he selected his prey, a young man already drunk enough that he'd barely remember anything. Vladric led him to a private corner, and Nora looked away as he fed, unable to watch but hearing the soft gasp and then the silence. When it was over, Vladric returned to her side with color in his cheeks and a satisfied expression. The young man wandered back to his friends, looking dazed but unharmed. Better, Vladric said, and his eyes seemed to glow brighter now. Much better. I can feel my strength returning already. He offered her his hand. Dance with me. What? No, I don't. Dance with me, Nora Gallagher. His smile was warm and dangerous. I've been imprisoned in darkness for 2 centuries. Let me feel alive again, just for a moment. She let him pull her onto the dance floor, too startled to resist. The music was loud and modern, nothing like the waltzes he must have known, but Vladric adapted instantly. He moved with inhuman grace, his hands on her waist, guiding her through the crowd. You're thinking too much, he murmured, close enough that she could feel his cold breath on her ear. Just Feel the music. Let yourself exist in this moment. Nora tried to relax, letting the beat guide her movements. Vladric held her close, and despite everything, the danger, the fear, the absolute insanity of dancing with a vampire king, she found herself enjoying it. There was something intoxicating about the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room worth his attention. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Of all the people who could have found you, why did it have to be me?" "Fate has a wicked sense of humor," Vladric replied. "Or perhaps the magic of the seal recognized something in you, a kindred spirit, maybe someone who understands what it's like to feel trapped by circumstances beyond their control." His hands tightened slightly on her waist. "You're stronger than you think, Nora. I can feel it through the bond." "I don't feel strong. I feel terrified and confused and completely out of my depth." "That's what courage is," Vladric said softly. "Being terrified and continuing anyway. You could have run screaming from that basement. You could have refused to help me. But you didn't. You're still here, facing the impossible with remarkable grace." Nora looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that wasn't entirely predatory. "You're not what I expected a vampire king to be." "No? What did you expect?" "More evil, I think. More monster. Less person." Vladric's laugh was rueful. "Give me time. You might change your mind once you see what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine." "I'm not yours," Nora protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Aren't you?" His eyes gleamed in the club lights. "The blood bond says otherwise. Like it or not, little Nora, you and I are tied together now. Your life is mine to protect, and my freedom depends on your survival. That's rather intimate, don't you think?" The song changed to something slower, and Vladric pulled her closer. Nora should have pushed him away, should have maintained some distance, but instead she found herself leaning into his cold embrace. He smelled like winter and old books and something darker she couldn't name. "This is insane," she whispered. "Most worthwhile things are." Vladric's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with surprising gentleness. "I promise to protect you, Nora. That's not a small thing coming from me. I don't give my word lightly, and I never break it." "Even if it means giving up your revenge?" "I didn't say that." His smile turned sharp. "But I'm patient. I've waited 2 centuries already. I can wait a bit longer to ensure you're safe before I start settling old scores." They danced until the club closed, and then Vladric walked her back to her car with his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. Nora felt hyper-aware of his presence, the way people instinctively moved out of his path, how his eyes seemed to see everything. "You're different when you fed," she observed as they drove home. "More human somehow. Blood is life for my kind. It warms us, strengthens us, makes us feel alive instead of just undead." Vladric watched the city lights blur past. "When we're starved, we become more monster than person. It's why the old vampires who isolate themselves often go mad. They forget what it's like to feel anything but hunger." "Is that what happened to you? In the coffin?" "No. The seal put me in stasis, neither truly alive nor dead. I didn't feel the passage of time, didn't hunger or dream or think. I simply stopped existing." His voice was quiet. Waking up was like being born again, painful and disorienting and overwhelming. Nora glanced at him. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for the council members who thought they could cage a king and face no consequences." The cold rage in his voice made her shiver. They're going to learn that some crimes have very long memories. Back at the apartment, Vladric seemed restless. He paced the small space like a caged animal, all that deadly grace barely contained. Nora watched him from her bed where she'd changed into pajamas and was pretending to read. "You should sleep," he said without looking at her. "I can feel your exhaustion through the bond." "I can't sleep with you pacing like that. You're making me nervous." Vladric stopped, turning to face her. "I'm making you nervous? You do realize you've been staring at me for the past 10 minutes like you're trying to solve a puzzle?" Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm trying to figure you out. 1 minute you're threatening to kill people, the next you're dancing with me and being almost nice. I don't understand you." "I'm both those things, Nora. Monster and man, king and prisoner, ancient and somehow new again in this strange world." He crossed to her, sitting on the edge of her bed with careful distance between them. I contain multitudes, as your modern poets might say. Does that frighten you? Everything about you frightens me, Nora admitted. But not in the way you think. I'm not afraid you'll hurt me. I'm afraid of what you make me feel. Vladric's expression shifted, a becoming intent. And what do I make you feel? Alive, she whispered, more alive than I've felt in years, like I'm part of something bigger than my small, ordinary life. It's terrifying and exhilarating and completely insane. Nora, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say anything charming or seductive or make any promises you can't keep. I know this is temporary. I know once you're strong enough and you found your court and dealt with your enemies, you won't need me anymore. The blood bond will break and you'll go back to your vampire world, and I'll go back to cleaning houses. So let's not pretend this is anything more than what it is, a temporary alliance born of magical necessity. Vladric was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand in his cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. You're wrong about one thing, he said softly. The blood bond isn't temporary. It's permanent. Even if I wanted to break it, which I don't, I couldn't. The magic that created it is ancient and absolute. You and I are connected now, Nora Gallagher, for as long as we both exist. Nora's heart stuttered. That's not possible. You can't be stuck with me forever just because I accidentally broke a seal. I prefer to think of it as fate giving me an unexpected gift. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. You freed me, Nora. You gave me back the world. The least I can do is give you a life worth living in return. I don't want to be a vampire, she said quickly. I'm not offering to turn you. That's a choice that should never be made lightly, and certainly not as payment for a debt. Vladric's expression was serious. But I can offer you protection, wealth, experiences you've never dreamed of. I can show you the hidden world that exists beneath the mundane surface of human society. I can give you purpose beyond cleaning other people's houses for minimum wage. And what would you want in return? Stay with me. Help me navigate this new world. Be my anchor to humanity as I reclaim my throne. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. And perhaps, if you're willing, let me court you properly. As a man courts a woman he finds fascinating and brave and utterly unlike anyone he's ever known. Nora's breath caught. You want to court me? A vampire king wants to court a cleaning lady? I want to court you, Nora Gallagher, because you're clever and kind and strong enough to face a monster in the darkness and offer him coffee instead of screaming. Your profession doesn't matter. Your humanity doesn't matter. What matters is that you make me feel something beyond rage and hunger for the first time in centuries. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a cold kiss to her knuckles. Say yes. Let me show you what it means to be cherished by someone who has all the time in the world to adore you. It was insane. It was impossible. It was everything Nora had ever read about in her romance novels, come to life in the most terrifying way possible. Yes, she whispered, because what else could she say when a vampire king looked at her like she was precious and rare and worth keeping? Vladric's smile was brilliant and dangerous and full of promise. Excellent. Then tomorrow we begin your real education. I'm going to introduce you to a world you never knew existed, my brave little Nora. And then we're going to burn down everyone who stands between me and my throne. The next few weeks passed in a blur of impossible things. Vladric proved to be a relentless teacher, educating Nora about vampire society while simultaneously learning about the modern world from her. They fell into a strange rhythm, days spent researching and preparing, nights spent exploring the hidden supernatural underbelly of the city. It turned out vampires were everywhere once you knew how to look for them. Vladric could sense his own kind, and he led Nora to nightclubs and private gatherings where the beautiful people with too pale skin and carefully hidden fangs congregated. Most were young vampires, turned within the last century, but they all recognized Vladric on some instinctive level as their superior. Word spread quickly through the vampire underground the High King had returned. The first of the old court to find them was a vampire named Severin, who showed up at Nora's apartment one evening with the bearing of nobility and terror in his eyes. He took one look at Vladric and dropped to one knee. "My king," he breathed, "we thought you were dead. The council said you'd been destroyed, that your line had ended. The council lied. Vladric's voice was cold as winter. Where are they, Severin? Where do the elders hide in this new world? Scattered, my lord. After they sealed you, the court's fragmented. There's no central authority anymore, just regional lords answering to the remnants of the council. Severin looked up, and Nora saw genuine emotion in his ancient eyes. It's been chaos for 2 centuries. Without your rule, vampire society has weakened. We're shadows of what we once were. Then it's time to remind them what real power looks like. Vladric helped Severin to his feet. Gather the loyal ones, anyone who served me faithfully before the betrayal. We're going to rebuild the court, and then we're going to pay a visit to the elders who thought they could cage a king. Severin bowed deeply. It will be done, my lord. Though I must warn you, there will be resistance. Some vampires have grown comfortable with the current disorder. They won't welcome your return. Let them resist. Vladric's smile was sharp as broken glass. I'm looking forward to reminding them why they used to fear me. As Severin left to carry out his orders, Nora felt the weight of what was coming settle over her. You're really going to do this, start a war to reclaim your throne. I'm going to reclaim what's mine, Vladric corrected. If others choose to make it a war, that's their decision. He turned to her, his expression softening. You can still walk away, Nora. The blood bond will keep you safe regardless of where you go. You don't have to be part of this. Yes, I do. Nora surprised herself with her certainty. You said we're connected. That means I'm part of this whether I like it or not, and honestly, she managed a shaky smile. I'd rather be at your side than wondering what's happening from a distance. Vladric crossed to her, cupping her face in his cold hands. You're remarkable, do you know that? Most humans would run from what's coming. But you choose to stand beside a monster. You're not a monster, Nora said firmly. You're dangerous and ruthless and probably going to get me killed, but you're not a monster. Monsters don't keep their promises or care about anyone but themselves. You've protected me, taught me, treated me like I matter. That's not monstrous. Nora. Her name was a sigh on his lips. I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want that, tell me to stop. She didn't tell him to stop. Instead, she tilted her face up as Vladric lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was cold and gentle and somehow perfect. He tasted like winter nights and old wine, and when his arms came around her, Nora felt safer than she had in years. The kiss deepened slowly, Vladric giving her every chance to pull away. But Nora found herself leaning into him instead, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back, with all the confused emotions swirling through her, fear and desire and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. When they finally broke apart, Vladric rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment you offered me coffee like I was a guest instead of a threat. I've wanted you to do that since you danced with me at the club, Nora admitted, even though I knew it was crazy. Everything about this is crazy. Vladric's laugh was soft and warm. But I find I don't care. You make me feel human again, Nora. You remind me that existence is about more than power and revenge and endless political games. Don't go soft on me now, Vampire King. You have a throne to reclaim. Oh, I'm still going to reclaim my throne. I'm still going to make the council regret their betrayal. But now I have something worth fighting for beyond pride and power. He kissed her again, brief and sweet. I have you. Over the following days, vampires began appearing at Nora's apartment in increasing numbers. Vladric's loyal followers, drawn by word of their king's return. They were a diverse group, some ancient and elegant, others young and fierce, all united by their devotion to Vladric and their desire to restore the old order. Nora found herself swept up in preparations for what Vladric called the restoration. Plans were made, alliances formed, intelligence gathered about the current council's locations and defenses. It was like watching a military campaign unfold in her tiny apartment, and she was somehow at the center of it all. Because of the blood bond, Vladric insisted she attend every meeting, witness every negotiation. You need to understand vampire politics if you're going to survive in our world, he explained. And make no mistake, Nora, you're part of our world now. These vampires see you as my chosen companion, which makes you almost as important as I am. That's terrifying, Nora said, watching a group of ancient vampires debate strategy in her living room. That's power. Vladric pulled her close, his arm around her waist. Get used to it. Once I reclaim my throne, you'll be at my side. The human who freed the High King and won his heart. I won your heart? Nora looked up at him, searching his face. Did you doubt it? Vladric's smile was tender. I'm 700 years old, Nora. I've known thousands of people, human and vampire alike, but none of them have ever made me feel the way you do, like I'm more than just a king or a predator or an ancient monster. You see me as a person. That's rarer and more precious than you can possibly imagine. Before Nora could respond, Severin approached with news. My lord, we've located 3 of the council members who voted to seal you. They're gathering in the old cathedral downtown for some kind of meeting tonight. Vladric's expression went cold and deadly. Perfect. Tonight we send a message. The High King has returned, and there will be a reckoning. Vladric, wait. Nora grabbed his arm. You promised no killing unless absolutely necessary. This is necessary, he said flatly. These vampires betrayed their king and threw vampire society into centuries of chaos. They deserve death. Maybe they do, Nora agreed quietly. But you also told me you wanted to be more than just a warmonger and a tyrant. Killing them in cold blood makes you exactly what they feared. Vladric stared at her for a long moment, conflict clear in his red eyes. Finally, he sighed. What would you have me do instead? Show mercy to those who showed me none? Show them you're better than they are, stronger. Prove that you don't need to kill them to win. Nora squeezed his arm. You're the High King, Vladric. Kings don't need to murder their enemies. They crush them with power and majesty and the weight of their authority. A slow smile spread across Vladric's face. When did you become so wise? I've been spending too much time with an ancient vampire king. Some of his cunning must be rubbing off. Nora tried to smile, but she was terrified of what was coming. Promise me you'll at least try to end this without unnecessary bloodshed. I promise to try, Vladric said, but Nora, if they threaten you or any of my loyal followers, all bets are off. I will paint the cathedral walls with their blood before I let them hurt what's mine. It would have to be enough. That night, Nora found herself in the passenger seat of a sleek black car as Vladric drove them to the old cathedral. Behind them, a convoy of vehicles carried his assembled court, dozens of vampires ready to support their returned king. Nora felt like she was riding into battle, her heart racing with fear and adrenaline. You don't have to come inside, Vladric said as they parked. This could get violent despite my promises. I'm coming. Nora's voice was steadier than she felt. You said I'm part of this world now. That means I face the danger alongside you. Vladric's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Stay close to me. No matter what happens, stay at my side. The blood bond will help protect you. But I need to know where you are. They entered the cathedral together, and Nora felt the weight of history pressing down on her. The building was ancient by American standards, its Gothic architecture reminiscent of European churches. But instead of holy light and peace, the space was filled with vampires, dozens of them, all turning to stare as Vladric strode down the center aisle with Nora at his side. At the altar stood 3 figures, ancient and elegant and radiating power. They wore modern clothing, but carried themselves with the bearing of medieval nobility. These were the council elders, and their expressions shifted from surprise to fear to rage as they recognized Vladric. Impossible, one of them breathed. A woman with silver-white hair and eyes like chips of ice. The seal was meant to be permanent. The seal was broken, Vladric replied, his voice carrying through the cathedral with absolute authority. By this human woman, who had more power in her innocent touch than all your careful magic combined. He stopped at the base of the altar steps, still holding Nora's hand. I am Vladric Konstantin Drăculești, High King of the Vampire Courts, and I have returned to reclaim what was stolen from me. You were a tyrant, another elder spat, a man with sharp features and venom in his eyes. You would have led our kind to destruction with your arrogance. I would have led us to glory, Vladric corrected. Instead, you sealed me away and let vampire society crumble into regional squabbles and petty power games. Look around you, this is what your leadership brought. Weakness and discord where there should be unity and strength. Murmurs ran through the assembled vampires. Nora could feel the tension building. New violence was seconds away from erupting. She squeezed Vladric's hand, reminding him of his promise. He glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. When he turned back to the elders, his voice was calmer. "I didn't come here for revenge, though I would be justified in taking it. I came to offer you a choice: bend the knee and acknowledge me as your rightful king, or step aside and let younger, wiser vampires lead our kind into this new century." "We'll never bow to you," the third elder hissed. "You're a relic, Drăculești. Your time has passed." "Then you've made your choice." Vladric's eyes blazed red. "I challenge you for leadership of the courts, all three of you, if you're brave enough. Trial by combat witnessed by everyone present. Let the vampires see which of us is stronger." The elders exchanged glances, and Nora saw fear flicker across their features. They were ancient and powerful, but Vladric was something beyond a royal vampire in his prime, fed and furious and finally free. "You can't win against all three of us," the ice-eyed woman said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Can I?" Vladric released Nora's hand and stepped forward. "Let's find out." What followed was the most terrifying and beautiful thing Nora had ever witnessed. Vladric moved like liquid death, faster than her eyes could follow, meeting three ancient vampires in combat with effortless grace. The cathedral echoed with the sounds of supernatural violence, bodies slamming into stone, glass shattering, the occasional cry of pain. But Vladric never lost control. He fought with precise, calculated movements, disabling rather than killing, proving his superiority without taking lives. Within minutes, all three elders lay on the ground, wounded but alive, while Vladric stood over them without a scratch. "Yield," he commanded, and his voice shook the cathedral rafters. One by one, the elders bent their heads in submission. Around them, every vampire in the cathedral dropped to one knee, acknowledging their king. All except Nora, who stood frozen in awe and terror at what she'd just witnessed. Vladric turned to her, and despite the violence he'd just displayed, his expression was gentle as he extended his hand. "Come here, my brave Nora." She crossed to him on shaking legs, placing her hand in his. Vladric pulled her close, turning to address the assembled vampires while keeping her at his side. "Let it be known throughout all vampire courts, the High King has returned, and a new era begins. We will no longer hide in shadows, pretending to be myths and legends. We will reclaim our rightful place as the apex predators of this world, but we will do so with intelligence and strategy, not mindless violence." His arm tightened around Nora's waist. "And this human woman, Nora Gallagher, is under my personal protection. Any vampire who harms her answers to me personally. Is that understood?" A chorus of voices affirmed their understanding. Nora felt the weight of dozens of vampire gazes on her, assessing her, wondering what made her special enough to stand beside their king. Vladric leaned down to whisper in her ear. "You're shaking. Are you afraid?" "Terrified," Nora admitted, "but also amazed. You were incredible." "I was showing off for you," he confessed, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Did it work?" "That depends. Are you going to be an enlightened ruler or a tyrant? With you at my side to keep me honest, I suppose I'll have to try for enlightened." Vladric pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank you for reminding me that strength isn't just about violence. You made me better tonight, Nora." The restoration of Vladric's rule took weeks of careful negotiation and strategic maneuvering. The vampire courts were scattered across the globe, and each regional lord had to be brought back into the fold through a combination of diplomacy, displays of power, and occasionally actual combat. Nora witnessed it all from Vladric's side. True to his word, he made her his constant companion, bringing her to every negotiation and introducing her as his chosen consort. It was overwhelming and terrifying and strangely thrilling to be part of this hidden world. They moved from her tiny apartment to the Ashford estate, which Vladric reclaimed as his primary residence. He filled it with loyal vampires who served as his new court, transforming the dusty mansion into a hub of supernatural politics. Nora found herself with servants, fine clothes, and a comfortable life she'd never imagined. But more than the material comfort, she found herself falling deeper in love with Vladric. He was attentive and protective, treating her like something precious. He taught her about vampire history and culture, shared stories from his long life, listened to her thoughts and opinions with genuine interest. "You're spoiling me," she told him one evening as they walked through the estate's gardens together. "I'm cherishing you," Vladric corrected. "There's a difference. Spoiling implies excess. Cherishing is simply giving you what you deserve." "And what do I deserve? I'm just a cleaning lady who accidentally freed a vampire king." "You're the woman who gave me back the world and then taught me how to be worthy of ruling it." Vladric stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "You're brilliant and brave and kind, and you make me want to be better than I am. That's worth more than any throne or title." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you. I know that's probably stupid and complicated and dangerous, but I can't help it. I love you, Vladric." His smile was radiant. "Loving me is definitely stupid, complicated, and dangerous. But I love you too, Nora Gallagher, with everything I have left that's still capable of love. You brought me back to life in more ways than one." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Nora let herself fall into it. They made love that night in his enormous bed, and Vladric was gentle and careful with her mortal body, treating her like fine glass that might shatter. Afterward, he held her close, his cold skin gradually warming from contact with hers. "I have something to ask you," he said quietly, "and I want you to think carefully before answering." Nora propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him. "What is it?" "I want you to stay with me. Not just for now, but permanently. I want to marry you, Nora, in both the human and vampire traditions. I want to bind myself to you in every way possible." He touched her face gently. "But I need you to understand what that means. You'll still be human, still mortal, but you'll be the queen consort of the vampire courts. Every vampire in the world will know your name and face. You'll be a target for my enemies and a symbol of my power. Your life will never be normal again." "My life stopped being normal the moment I opened that coffin," Nora pointed out. "And honestly, I don't want normal anymore. Normal was lonely and exhausting and small. This life, with you, with all its danger and strangeness, feels right. Like this is what I was meant for." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," Nora confirmed. "I'll marry you, Vladric. I'll be your queen and stand beside you for however long my human life lasts." Vladric's expression grew serious. "About that. There's something else we need to discuss. Eventually, if you want, I could turn you, make you vampire, give you immortality so we could truly have forever together." Nora had known this conversation was coming, but she still wasn't ready for it. "I don't know if I want that. Being human feels like an essential part of who I am." "I know. That's why I'm not pushing. The offer stands. For whenever you're ready, or if you're never ready." Vladric pulled her close again. "But know this, Nora. I will love you whether you're human or vampire, mortal or immortal. Your humanity is part of what I adore about you. If you choose to remain human, I'll cherish every moment we have together, however brief in the scope of my long existence." "How brief?" Nora asked quietly. "If I stay human, how long do we have? 50 years? Maybe 60 if you're lucky and modern medicine is kind. A blink of an eye for me." His voice was rough with emotion. "But I would rather have 50 real years with you than 1,000 empty centuries without you. So don't choose immortality for my sake, Nora. Choose it only if it's what you truly want." Nora kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "Can I have time to think about it?" "You can have all the time you need. We have years to make that decision." Vladric smiled against her lips. "For now, let's focus on planning a wedding that will make the entire vampire world take notice. I want everyone to know that the High King has found his queen." The wedding took place 3 months later, a lavish affair that blended human and vampire traditions. They were married at sunset in the Ashford Estate's gardens, with Nora in a dress that cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, and Vladric in formal attire that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Gothic painting. Vampires came from across the globe to witness their king's marriage, and Nora stood before them all without flinching. She'd grown into her role over the past months, learning to command respect despite her humanity. When Vladric placed the wedding band on her finger, an antique piece engraved with vampire symbols, she felt the weight of what it represented. I vow to love you, protect you, and stand beside you for all the days of my existence, Vladric said, his red eyes locked on hers. You are my queen, my heart, my reason for drawing breath. Everything I am is yours, Nora. I vow to love you, challenge you, and keep you honest for all the days of my life, Nora replied, her voice steady. You are my king, my love, my unexpected miracle. Everything I am is yours, Vladric. They sealed the vows with a kiss that drew cheers from the assembled guests, and Nora Gallagher became Nora Drăculești, queen consort of the vampire courts. The celebration lasted 3 days, as was vampire tradition. Nora danced until her feet hurt, met vampires from every corner of the earth, and slowly began to understand the scope of what she'd become part of. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a political alliance, a symbol of unity, a promise that the vampire courts would enter this new age with strength and purpose. But through it all, Vladric never left her side. He was attentive and loving, making sure she was comfortable, running interference when ancient vampires became too intense, stealing quiet moments alone with her whenever possible. On the 3rd night, after the last guests had departed, they stood together on the estate's balcony, looking out over the grounds. Vladric had his arms around Nora from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. Happy, my queen? He asked softly. Terrified and exhausted and happier than I've ever been, Nora admitted. Is it always going to be this intense? Probably. Vampire politics never rest, and as my queen, you'll be in the thick of it. Vladric pressed a kiss to her hair. But I promise you this, Nora, no matter how complicated things get, you and I will face it together. You're not alone anymore. Neither are you, Nora said, turning in his arms to face him. You spent centuries ruling alone, trapped alone, suffering alone. But that's over now. We're a team, Vladric. Whatever comes next, we handle it together. Together, Vladric agreed, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. I love you, Nora Drăculești, my queen, my savior, my unexpected everything. I love you too, my vampire king. 5 years passed in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Nora settled into her role as queen consort, becoming a respected figure in vampire society despite her humanity. She learned vampire law and politics, mediated disputes, and proved herself to be both diplomatic and fierce when necessary. Vladric ruled with a combination of strength and wisdom, transforming the vampire courts into something more organized and purposeful than they'd been in centuries. He kept his promise to avoid unnecessary violence, preferring strategy and negotiation to bloodshed. But he was still ruthless when needed, and vampire society thrived under his leadership. Through it all, their love deepened. They were partners in every sense, ruling together, learning from each other, building a life that bridged the gap between human and vampire worlds. Vladric introduced Nora to the wonders of vampire culture, while she kept him grounded in humanity and prevented him from becoming the tyrant he'd once been. But time was beginning to show its effects on Nora. At 31, she was still young by human standards, but she could feel the difference between her mortal body and Vladric's eternal one. He never aged, never changed, while she accumulated small lines around her eyes and the occasional gray hair. It didn't bother her most days, but sometimes, when she looked at their reflection together, she wondered about the future. 50 years seemed like both forever and not nearly long enough. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Vladric brought up the subject she'd been avoiding. You've been thinking about the turning, he said quietly. I can feel it through the bond, Nora sighed. Is it that obvious? Only to me. The blood bond means I'm very attuned to your emotional state. Vladric sat beside her on their bed, taking her hand. Talk to me, Nora. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that I love being human, but I love you more. I'm thinking that 50 years isn't enough time with you. I'm thinking that watching myself age while you stay frozen in time is going to hurt for both of us. She met his eyes. I'm thinking maybe I'm ready to become vampire after all. Vladric's expression was carefully neutral. This has to be your choice, Nora. Not made for me, or because you're afraid of aging, or because of external pressure. Becoming vampire is permanent and irreversible. You need to be absolutely certain. I know, and I am certain. Nora squeezed his hand. I've had 5 years to think about it, Vladric. 5 years of living in your world, loving you, building this life together. I don't want it to end when my human body fails. I want forever with you, if you'll have me. If I'll have you? Vladric laughed, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. Nora, I would give you the sun and moon if I could. Forever with you is all I've wanted since the moment you freed me from that coffin. He cupped her face in his hands. But I need you to understand what you'll lose. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the taste of human food, the ability to have children. I know what I'll lose, Nora interrupted, and I know what I'll gain. Strength, immortality, the ability to truly stand as your equal. I've made my peace with the sacrifices. Vladric, I want this. He studied her face for a long moment, searching for any hint of doubt. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Then I will turn you, but we'll do it properly, with ritual and ceremony befitting a future vampire queen. I want the transition to be as painless and dignified as possible. When? Nora asked. Whenever you're ready. Tonight, if you wish, or we can wait. Give you time to say goodbye to your human life properly. Nora thought about it. She'd already distanced herself from her old life over the past 5 years. Her few friends from before had drifted away, unable to understand her new reality. She had no family to speak of. Everything that mattered to her was here, in this room, in this man who'd somehow become her entire world. Tonight, she decided. I don't want to wait anymore. Turn me tonight, Vladric. Make me yours in every possible way. The ritual was both beautiful and terrifying. Vladric prepared a ceremonial chamber in the depths of the estate, filled with candles and ancient vampire symbols. He dressed Nora in white, explaining that it represented death and rebirth. She would die as a human and be reborn as vampire. This will hurt, he warned, as he helped her lie down on a silk-covered altar. The turning is painful, even when done carefully. Your body has to die and remake itself from the inside out. But I'll be here the entire time, and I'll make it as quick as possible. I trust you, Nora said, though her heart was racing with fear. Vladric leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. I love you, Nora. Remember that, through everything that's about to happen. I love you, and this is going to give us eternity together. I love you too, Nora whispered. Do it. He bit her then, his fangs sinking into the pulse point of her throat with practiced precision. The pain was sharp but brief, replaced by a strange floating sensation as he drank. Nora felt her heartbeat slowing, her breathing becoming shallow, the world growing dim around the edges. Just before she lost consciousness completely, Vladric bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. Drink, he commanded, and she obeyed, tasting his blood cold and electric and powerful. It burned going down, filling her with ice and fire simultaneously. Then the real pain began. Nora's body convulsed as the vampire blood spread through her system, killing and remaking her cells one by one. She screamed, distantly aware of Vladric holding her, speaking words of comfort she couldn't quite hear over the roaring in her ears. It felt like dying, because it was dying, her humanity burning away to make room for something new and terrible and powerful. She didn't know how long it lasted, hours maybe, or days. Time lost meaning in the pain. But eventually, it faded, leaving behind a strange stillness. Her heart had stopped beating. Her lungs no longer drew breath automatically. But she felt more alive than ever, every sense heightened to impossible sharpness. Nora opened her eyes and saw the world in vivid, perfect detail. Every candle flame was a distinct star, every shadow precisely defined. She could hear Vladric's unnecessary breathing, the whisper of air through the estate's corridors, the scurrying of mice in the walls. She could smell ancient stone and wax and blood and something distinctly vampire that she now recognized as Vladric's unique scent. Nora? Vladric's voice was tentative, worried. How do you feel? She sat up slowly, testing her new body. Strength flooded through her, along with an overwhelming hunger that made her throat burn. Hungry, she gasped. I'm so hungry, Vladric. I know, come here. He helped her stand, guiding her to where he'd prepared glasses of blood, human blood, she realized, donated from willing sources. Drink slowly. Your body needs to adjust. Nora drank, and the hunger receded to manageable levels. With it came clarity, allowing her to truly assess what she'd become. She crossed to a mirror. Old myths about vampires not having reflections were false, and studied her new appearance. She looked like herself, but perfected. Her skin had taken on the pale, luminous quality of all vampires. Her eyes, which had been plain brown, now held flecks of red that gleamed in the candlelight. Her features seemed sharper, more defined, radiating an otherworldly beauty she'd never possessed as a human. "I'm beautiful," she whispered in wonder. "You always were," Vladric said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "But yes, the transformation enhances certain qualities. Royal blood affects the turning. You're not just vampire now, Nora. You're vampire royalty, queen in truth as well as title." Nora turned in his embrace, seeing him clearly for the first time with vampire senses. He was breathtaking, power and beauty and ancient strength all wrapped in one perfect form. And he was hers, completely and eternally. "I can feel the bond differently now," she said, pressing her hand over her heart. "It's stronger, clearer, like a thread connecting us. Because you're vampire now, you can sense it properly. We're linked, Nora, in ways that go beyond normal vampire bonds, bound by magic and blood and love." Vladric kissed her softly. "How do you feel about what you've become?" Nora considered the question honestly. She felt powerful, immortal, transformed. She'd lost her humanity but gained so much more, and looking at Vladric, knowing they now had forever together, she felt nothing but joy. "I feel free," she said finally, "like I've finally become who I was always meant to be. Your queen, your equal, your eternal companion." "Then let me be the first to properly greet you into immortality." Vladric dropped to one knee, taking her hand in his. "Welcome to eternity, Nora Drăculești, my queen, my love, my everything." Nora pulled him to his feet and kissed him with all the passion and power of her new vampire strength. They made love in that ceremonial chamber, christening her new existence with joy and desire and the absolute certainty that they belonged together. The vampire court celebrated Nora's transformation with another lavish event, this one even grander than their wedding. Vampires came from across the world to witness their queen's rebirth, to pay homage to the human woman who'd won their king's heart and earned immortality. Nora stood beside Vladric during the ceremony, no longer needing his protection, but still choosing to remain at his side. She was powerful now in her own right. Royal vampire blood made her stronger, faster, more formidable than common vampires. But it was her combination of vampire power and retained human compassion that made her truly special. "The courts are stronger with you in them," Severin told her during the celebration. "You balance the king in ways none of us could. He's still powerful, still commanding, but you've made him wise as well. That's a rare gift." Nora smiled, watching Vladric negotiate with a regional lord across the room. "He made himself wise. I just remind him occasionally that power isn't the only thing that matters. Nevertheless, we are grateful. The vampire world is better for your presence in it, my queen." As the celebration continued, Nora found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From a lonely cleaning lady scraping by on 3 jobs to the queen of the vampire courts, with eternity stretching before her. It seemed impossible, like something out of one of the romance novels she used to read. But it was real. She was real. Vladric was real, and their love was the most real thing of all. Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were alone again, Vladric took her to the rooftop of the Ashford estate. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling like stars. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up your humanity for me?" "Never," Nora said firmly. "I gave up a small, lonely existence for something extraordinary. How could I regret that?" She leaned against him, marveling at how their bodies fit together perfectly now, both cold and immortal. "Do you regret that I freed you from that coffin?" "If I did, I would be the greatest fool in existence." Vladric turned to face her, his red eyes gleaming with emotion. "You gave me back the world, Nora. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to be better than I was. You transformed me, as surely as I transformed you." "Then we're even," Nora said with a smile. Two lost souls who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk into the light together. Together, Vladric agreed, pulling her close. For eternity. They stood there on the rooftop, king and queen of the vampire courts, watching the night deepen around them. Somewhere in the city below, other vampires moved through the shadows, living out their immortal lives. Somewhere beyond the city limits, the old council members they'd spared lived in exile, broken reminders of a failed attempt to cage a king. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was this moment, this connection, this perfect understanding between two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. Nora thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, tired, lonely, desperate for something more. She thought about the moment her flashlight had first illuminated that black stone coffin, the instant that changed everything. She thought about Vladric opening his eyes and smiling, that terrible, beautiful smile that had promised danger and transformation. If she could go back to that moment, knowing everything that would follow, would she still break the seal? Absolutely, because breaking that seal hadn't just freed a vampire king. It had freed her too from a life half-lived, from loneliness, from the quiet desperation of existing without truly living. Vladric had given her purpose, adventure, love, and ultimately, eternity. He'd shown her a hidden world and made her queen of it. He'd seen value in her when she'd barely seen it in herself. And in return, she'd given him back his throne, his purpose, his capacity for love. She'd challenged him to be better, to rule with wisdom instead of just power. She'd stood beside him through political battles and vampire intrigue. She'd chosen him, completely and without reservation, in ways that surprised them both. They were perfect for each other, the vampire king and the cleaning lady who'd freed him. Different in every way that mattered, and yet somehow exactly the same where it counted. Both fierce, both loyal, both willing to fight for what they believed in. "What are you thinking about?" Vladric asked, his arms tightening around her waist. "Happy endings," Nora replied. "How they're real after all, even if they look different than expected." "Is this your happy ending, my love?" "This is my happy beginning," Nora corrected. "The ending is still thousands of years away, and I intend to enjoy every moment between now and then." Vladric laughed, the sound rich and warm and full of joy. Spoken like a true vampire queen, always planning for the long game. "I learned from the best." Nora tilted her face up for a kiss, which Vladric provided with enthusiasm. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to the silence where his heartbeat used to be. "Thank you for waiting for me, for being sealed in darkness for 2 centuries until I could find you and set you free. Thank you for being brave enough to break the seal, for seeing a monster in a coffin and offering him coffee instead of running away, for loving me despite knowing what I am and what I'm capable of." Vladric pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You're my miracle, Nora, my unexpected, wonderful, perfect miracle." They stayed on the rooftop until dawn approached, talking and planning and simply existing together in perfect harmony. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of sunrise, they retreated inside to their chambers, where they could rest safely away from the sun's weakening rays. Nora no longer needed to sleep as much as when she was human, but she enjoyed the ritual of lying beside Vladric, their bodies entwined, existing in peaceful stillness. She could feel the blood bond humming between them, stronger than ever now that they were both vampire. It was a constant reminder that they belonged to each other, bound by magic and choice, and love so deep it transcended species. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness of their room. "I will love you for all the centuries to come, Vladric. That's my vow to you, not just as your queen, but as your partner, your equal, your eternal companion." "And I love you," Vladric replied, his voice soft with emotion. "For all the centuries behind me and all the centuries ahead, you are my heart, Nora. You always will be." They drifted into the light rest that vampires called sleep, safe in each other's arms, secure in their love and their power and their shared future. Outside, the world continued its endless turning. Humans lived and died. Empires rose and fell. Time marched relentlessly forward. But inside the Ashford estate, in the chambers of the vampire king and queen, time held no power. They had forever now, an eternity to explore and experience and simply be together. The cleaning lady and the vampire king, bound by fate and magic and a love strong enough to transform them both. It was a beginning worthy of legend, the kind of story that would be told in vampire courts for centuries to come. How a human woman broke an ancient seal and freed the High King. How she stood beside him as he reclaimed his throne. How he loved her so deeply that he gave her immortality, making her his queen in every possible way. But to Nora and Vladric, it wasn't a legend or a story. It was simply their truth, their reality, their happy beginning that would never have to end. And somewhere in the darkness, if you listened carefully, you could hear the echo of laughter. Two voices joined in joy, celebrating the impossible love that had saved them both from loneliness and given them everything they never knew they needed. Together, forever, just as it was always meant to be.